instead going to a place within and knowing that you can resource all of your needs from deep within. And so seeing yourself healing and helping and cooperating with the part of us that is not congruent to a place where they can feel congruent with the whole is hugely, it reinforces a new strength and resilience that would not otherwise be there.
Welcome to Profound Shifts. I am your host, Nate Prince. In pursuit of growth for the mind, body, and soul, we talk to humanity's pioneers, game changers, healers, and disruptors to help you make the profound shifts in your life that lead to peace, joy, freedom, and abundance. Are you ready for a life of growth? In this interview with Nora Young, a transpersonal hypnotherapist and also a teacher of clinical hypnotherapy, we get to talk about consciousness, personal sovereignty, and the changes that we can make inside of our own lives, the paradigm shifts that will lead to rapid progress. So sit back, relax, and let's jump right into this interview with Nora Young. From our last conversation and from what I walked away with, and first of all, I do want to say that I walked away with a lot of things, first of all, for me to think about, and it was like, I almost felt like, oh man, I know this may sound a little funny, but I felt like you saw into my soul when we were on the conversation, and I know that probably sounds wild, but like I walked away from the conversation, and you just said a few key things there that I took a lot away. One of them being personal sovereignty and like what that means. Like how do I resonate with personal sovereignty, and how do I incorporate that inside my life, and what should it look like versus what does it look like? And I want to get into that a little bit later. But like, so what I was saying is you seem, you live this. It's not a theoretical concept of consciousness and hypnotherapy. When is it that you felt like you tapped into this understanding, into this wisdom?
Thank you. That's super sweet. Yeah. And the personal sovereignty thing that's awesome that you're finding your own congruence with it. Cause I found that to be like a really, really powerful key, in my work and with my own work. I mean, none of the stuff that I do with my clients is stuff that I haven't done. It's all, I'm a lot of the times I'm riffing, but it's all work that I've touched on myself or dive deeply into myself. Like I'm a work in progress. I'm always going to be expanding. And so I share that with my clients as it comes. And I just trust that as I'm being shown, I can offer that with an authentic sense of real healing behind it, because we're all just here doing this thing on earth. Right. Yeah. And so and your question is a little bit of a chicken and the egg question for me. I was born this way in a lot of ways, and I can even, the benefit friends in this field too is I've had a lot of opportunities to do hypnotherapy sessions and go into the womb and go into past lives and play in the spirit realm and learn about what my soul's intent was in coming to this lifetime. So I look at my relationship with my parents, I look at my relationship with my twin brother and sister and where I grew up and all of those factors and how they were such a huge nourishment to who I am. It's an imprinting, right, of who this person Nora is, and my soul gets to just play in that imprint, right? And I get to shape it as I go. And it's playful for me, and I've always had a really playful spirit. And
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm just curious. So like you say, like the way that you look at your perspective, how you see yourself and how, you've been imprinted with this life. I don't know how to say it as eloquently as you did. Are you able to maintain that perspective through daily life, like when challenges hit, or is it a skill that you learned? How do you do that? I'm just curious.
Yes and no. It's always a work in progress. So I'll share with you. So a difficult time would be like last night. I was woken up and I woke up with fear, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this fear in my chest? And so I've done my inner work enough to know that if I'm not feeling afraid of anything that I can identify, because I'm not married to the story, it's just like, what is this energy within my body? And then how do I give myself what I need in order to shift out of it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real quick and dirty of it. It took me an hour to even get into a place of meditation where I could actually calm myself. But, and I'll just jump right into it. I feel like people who are sensitives are feeling the anxiety of this time that we're in right now. There's a real, and this is my perception, but I feel like the 3D reality and the 5D reality are really splitting. And so we can talk about consciousness, but people who are going towards the light, go to the light. We're creating a reality in one way, and people who are drawn into pain, fear, angst, anger, frustration, negative, lower vibratory, war, etc., division, are creating another reality that is it. Like, I feel the pull, and I know people who are watching can totally relate to this, so I don't need to spend a ton of time here, but I was feeling it last night, and I've just totally accepted the fact that that's my gig. Like, energy is my gig. I feel intensely because I'm a human being, and that's part of the experience that I came here to have. And I'm feeling because that's something that is being given to me as a gift. If I choose to see it that way, it's a gift. And then what can I do to shift it for myself? And if I shift it for myself, I'm shifting it for the collective.
Wow. Yeah. So
it's a gift that I can give myself, yes, and just addressing self-care,
Mm-hmm.
but the benefit of that is it transmutes for the collective as well.
Totally.
And I'm sure people like you, Nathaniel, and other people who may be watching have experienced where they've gone through some dark night of the soul or some intense experience. And then right there is a friend who's going through the exact same thing immediately after, and they're like, well, come to find out I just went through that last week. Or it's like it shows up in our field, right? When we're dealing with something, others who are going through it also show up. So it's this beautiful harmonizing in the collective that happens, and you don't have to intend for it to happen, it just does.
Yeah. I was had a conversation with a really good friend of mine the other day, and he has had his own struggles like all of us, and the other day he said that he just woke up and he just felt completely overwhelmed with some of the struggles of life, where he said his words, as soon as his feet hit the floor, it was just like he was just totally overwhelmed with emotion, and it was very difficult for him to function during that day. And the reason why I bring this up is because you're talking about the collective and how we can influence each other. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the collective emotions, and when he was going through something like that, is that something where he's tapping into probably, I'm sure, personal, but also a higher awareness?
So the what is it? The ancient mystery school saying is as above, so below. So yeah. We're going through it, and the collective is going through it. But I think on a broader level, what our consciousness says is expanding, and so that just means that more of us are becoming. So we're in the state of awakening. I don't know if any of you old timers saw Highlander, where there's the quickening, right? We're going through a quickening process where more of our energetic self, our non-physical self, is being activated and felt. Mm-hmm. And that requires some people like to use the term dying of the old self. That's kind of hard and intense for people, especially people who have perceptions of fear of death. But the self is having to reconcile this new energy. I like to soften it with like, we're reconciling. We're like, okay, here's the new energy. This is what I know from before, and this is what I'm sort of taking on. And sometimes it's like taking on a fire hose. And and I would just say, like, now is a really important time to establish some powerful intentions for self-care. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's not the tendency, it's not the norm for people to notice. And so often what I find in my practice is people have to have catastrophic injuries or illnesses just so they can get horizontal and rest. So I recommend that when you're feeling overwhelmed, take some time to soften. You know, the universe is saying, here's a big helping for you. And it's possible that on some level, you know, we souls that are here on earth are very ambitious. And so we may have requested that big, heavy helping of intense energy, but we don't have our sea legs, you know, yet. So we've got to retreat. We've got to take care of ourselves so our bodies can harmonize with that energy. And if any of you have had any kind of body work or massage or energy healing, often you'll feel, or like just working out really hard, your body needs to kind of chill and relax. You've moved around old energies, release toxins, and so that can feel a little cruddy. You need to drink more water. So in order to deal with the overwhelm, we need to soften. It's just that balancing. It's like, oh, the overwhelm means that there's more coming in. It's like, like a heavy downpour of energy. The universe is giving me more. And instead of like trying to hammer it out, like, okay, I'm going to go to work. And, you know, it's easier said than done. I know I'm a mom and I work, but, you know, finding some softening in your schedule will enable expansion. You know, like pad your schedule with extra time to heal and adjust, and you will be doing a huge favor, because then you have more capacity for your family, for your loved ones, for yourself.
You know what I find interesting is I just did an interview with another lady, and at the end of the interview I asked her, you know, like, if you could give yourself advice from 10 years ago, what would that be? And she was exactly in line with what you were just saying, is it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take that time, you know. That's huge.
And your body will make it happen. You know, I literally will have clients who come in, and I had a client who is a very high achieving client. This person is very successful, but they came in to my office to work on, they had this sort of fight with their alarm clock. Like they would set their alarm clock and then just like constantly pushing it. And it was really frustrating because it's like, I'm so high achieving, I can't seem to get out of bed when I tell myself I'm supposed to get out of bed. And when it came down to it, it was this aspect of the self that was like, you need more rest. And so we're going to get it however we need to. And so that's how the subconscious mind works. And that's why this work is so fascinating. It's like, no, you're going to get your needs met, but you may like have to break a leg in order to do it. You know, it's like, now you're not going anywhere. You're going to rest.
Yeah.
So don't do that. I recommend just like, okay, noticing, easier said than done, I know, but notice when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you have a headache, whatever, take a nap, chill, or just, you know, just bring the RPMs of the nervous system down to an idle.
You know, it's something that a concept, I guess, that I am recognizing in what you're talking about here, and I think that it's a perceptual shift, and that's that you speak about these things like breaking a leg, you know, or these things happening to you as if there is a purpose behind it. So looking at these things that happen to us, accidents or illnesses or diseases, and seeing a purpose in them rather than just seeing the injury or the illness. Can you speak a little bit about where this belief or how this understanding that you have there?
Sure. I can tell you about a trend that I'm seeing very frequently in my office, which is a person will come to my office and they'll have a goal in mind. And there's some aspect of the self that is, and I'm still already using hypnotherapy terms. Hypnotherapists do believe that everything is accessible, anything is achievable, but that there's a belief that there is a program within the subconsciousness that is out of alignment with the goal of the whole, we'll say. And so the goal of the hypnotherapist is to connect with that aspect that's like, running roughshod, doing their own thing. And it could be multiple aspects doing that. But for example, people will come in and they'll say, I want to make more money, or I want to stop cheating on my spouse, or whatever it is. And very often what I find is there is a aspect that is an unacknowledged, usually around the age of 10 to or 8 to 15, I would say, an older child within. And hypnotherapists are familiar with inner child work, or any kind of therapist is typically familiar with inner child work. But there is this age that seems to be common in my work, that I'm finding people show up with this kind of unrequited, unacknowledged, abandoned feeling young self that is just like, pulling all kinds of crazy tricks that are, and what it comes down to. So we do a process called parts therapy, and parts basically just addresses the aspects of us that are not in congruence with the rest of the whole. And so if we're cheating on our spouse, we'd say, okay, when they're in a trance, bring forward the one who is not interested in being, or not being faithful to the spouse. And so they'll see, connect, feel, experience this one that is basically perpetuating the infidelity. And we meet this one with an objective, just sort of, I'm observing you, and just getting a sense of like, what does this one need? And often this one just wants to be acknowledged. So that's one of the very first things that happens, is just acknowledge that this part exists. And often just in the acknowledgement that this part is there will be a softening. And how that shows up for each person is different. But the part has a need. And you can simply ask this one, what is it that you need in order to be in alignment with the whole? And this is a very simplified interpretation. But in essence, the part has a need that can be addressed by the whole. And then you basically visualize giving and doing that for the part. So it's all through imagination, really, that this is taking place. And the part can heal and ultimately integrate into the whole and have a new agreement to cooperate in a way that works for the whole and causes the whole to thrive.
Wow. So, when we have these different parts, because there's parts of my brain kind of going in two different directions here, and I'm wondering, maybe you can kind of help me like pull this together.
Sure.
So the subconscious operates in a way that I definitely don't have a full understanding of. I don't know if anyone does, but you're talking about these parts. Is that a part that operates within our subconscious, or is it something that is in like our field of consciousness?
Well, so we're conscious of the result. Like, so I have a client who can go into like over shopping mode, and just all of a sudden go into like, I'm going to just buy a ton of crap and just buy, like gambling. And this one is like triggered into that place of I'm just online buying stuff. And then the consciousness is like, oh my gosh, I'm not in control of myself right now. There's an aspect of me that is behaving outside of my perceived control. And so that's why the whole idea of willpower is so defeating for people, because it's like, I'm aware of it, I'm conscious of it, it's still happening, and I can't seem to stop it, or addiction, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when we go to the aspect that's actually perpetuating this, that's in the subconscious mind. That's the part of us that is, it could have been programmed when we were teeny tiny, could be pre-verbal, you know, but for whatever reason, there was a perception at that time. And you can literally, through regression, go to the time where that decision was made by that aspect. And you could also call that a fragmented part of the soul. It's an oversimplification, but it's a way of saying that there's an aspect that is not in congruence, and that the goal is to bring that aspect back into alignment with the whole, because that part often feels alone, alienated, abandoned. And so they're just kind of in this reality of their own in this triggered state.
Yeah.
And so bringing it out of the triggered state and personal sovereignty piece comes into play. So instead of looking externally for feeling better, which is how humanity has pretty much been taught to feel better, is to look externally. You know, look to friends, just look externally. You know, how am I doing? Tell me how I'm doing. And instead going to a place within and knowing that you can resource all of your needs from deep within. And so seeing yourself healing and helping and cooperating with the part of us that is not congruent to a place where they can feel congruent with the whole is hugely, it reinforces a new strength and resilience that would not otherwise be there.
Wow. So who do you know, when you think about, I guess first of all, so you work in the field of hypnotherapy. What is it that you feel you do best as far as this world goes when you're working with people?
That's a great question. I help people let go of their stories and come up with ones that are more empowering, that they can really resonate with. So one of the gifts that I have is I can hear incongruence in language. And there's a bunch of us out there. And so I can hear vibrationally in a person's communication whether there's authenticity or not. So I recently became really good friends with a person who does great business coaching and has the same skill set. And it's really cool to have conversations with her because there's just so much authenticity. But so say a person says, you know, this is who I am, this is what my life is about. And when I'm sitting with them, hearing what they're saying about their life, their story, as it were, I can hear what's not resonant. And so when I feel the incongruence, I'll just ask more questions. It's a very safe place to be incongruent, because if you're not, it's no big deal. Like, people just don't even realize that they're incongruent, but it's an opportunity for me to notice, okay, here's a little area in the, you know, in the matrix, as it were, where I can say, oh, this doesn't feel congruent. Tell me more about that. And then soon enough, it will be revealed. And then, oh, I never thought of it that way. But usually people are so used to hiding their incongruence that they're afraid of being exposed. And then when they're finally able to just be who they are with love and compassion and just like, listen, I hear this is happening. I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it true that this is actually how you feel? I mean, it's fine with me if it is. Yeah, I guess it is. Awesome. Well, what does that mean for you then? Like, just knowing that there's a part of you that can now be included in expressing who you are, this huge component that you've been denying. Like, just knowing that there's a suppressed part of us that we can now acknowledge and bring into the fold is like, that in and of itself is hugely relieving to a lot of people. And it makes sense, right?
Totally. Well, it's like, you know, so often we go through life and there's this entire world or realm of possibilities for us out there. Yet, because of the things that have happened to us in the past or where we're at in life, we don't even recognize, we can't even see that world. And so, for you to be able to speak with people and help them recognize that incongruence, it's like you're giving them the option of a different flavor of life, I guess, so to speak. So if you had a buffet of different choices, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, there's a whole nother table down here with all kinds of options. I think that's tremendously powerful, especially for people who have felt stuck, or like, I guess, like they just feel like, well, I guess this is what I've experienced. This is what life is going to be like going forward. And I find in my own work that so many people have just accepted that life is going to continue to be the same forevermore.
Yeah, that's horrible. If there's anything that people get from this conversation, whether they decide that they have to work with me or not, it's that's BS. Like, life is meant to be an unfolding adventure, like, to whatever degree. Like, is it a black diamond or is it a bunny slope? It doesn't matter. But just, it's gonna keep unfolding. And so how do you want the twists and turns to be? And yeah, I love your buffet metaphor, because it's so, like, that's the way it should be. Like, oh my gosh, there's all this amazing stuff to choose from, and today I'll get this, and we don't have to have the entire buffet today. We can have some, like, there's a buffet for the rest of our lives and future lives, right?
Yeah.
So that's exciting. So I'm being told to just bring this up, so I'm bringing it up, and it's around infidelity with people. And the reason I bring it up is because I guess the collective is ready to hear this, but I've seen a bunch with clients that have had some perceived I guess cheating on their partner, but in a way that is like maybe minor, like maybe they kissed someone many, many years ago, or they cheated on a high school relationship or whatever, and they're still holding that energy of cheating, of infidelity, of distrust, and still continuing to flog themselves mentally and emotionally and not have better relationships. And it's like, I'm not worthy of a good relationship because I'm unfaithful. I've just seen this happen a lot, and it's like, no, like, when is it enough? When is it enough to beat yourself? Like, when have you beat yourself up enough? And why are we even in relationships, right? Like, I think humanity, and I know in this country for sure, people get into relationships because they think they're supposed to. I mean, no. They're supposed to nourish you and uplift you and be partnerships that help you be seen and shine your bright light. And if it's not that, like, do not buy the hype that you can't find anything better. Like, I remember, I'll share my own story, that when I was 22, I was dating somebody that I thought was so cool, and he was in my community. He was a little teeny bit famous and played musician, was in theater, and I was like, oh, I was so starstruck. But I was the most lonely in that relationship than ever before. And I was just young. I was young. And I realized at that moment, being alone was less lonely than being in a loveless relationship. And so I don't know why I'm being shown to share this, but like, being alone doesn't mean you can't have people in your life. And so part of my work too is helping people to understand that you can have close relationships that are platonic. And if it's uncomfortable, because a lot of people are like, well, this person turns me on because they light me up. And a lot of times people can confuse that with sexual arousal. And I will just challenge you all to find more platonic partnerships with people and be loved. Allow yourself to be loved and not have it necessarily mean sexual, because not everybody is going to be someone that you want as a lover, and vice versa. But you can have so much love in your life if you sort of collapse the belief that you can't have friends of the opposite sex or whatever your sexual proclivity is. Like, have love in your life.
Well, I think that's something that you touched on there that rings a bell in my head, is allow yourself to be loved. I mean, that what you said there is so massive, because I think that a lot of us, and I know that this is something that I've struggled with in my life, is, opening up and allowing myself to have relationships with people and to be vulnerable with people. Is there anything that you've seen that could help people with that process of allowance, of receiving?
Yeah, is to know that we're all worthy of love, and that there is no value dollar sign where one person is more valuable and another person isn't. Like, you're born, therefore you're worthy. Every human being has a priceless level of worthiness. You are lovable, and if there's someone who has a hard time loving you, then go away from them, because they don't get it. And I'll share another personal story. Like, I kissed a lot of frogs before I met my amazing husband. and I'll say that the thing that annoyed my previous boyfriends about my personality, like, they all seemed to get annoyed by similar things in my personality. That was the thing that my husband found the most attractive. And it was effortless on my part, because I remember being like, so this is that thing that guys tend to get annoyed by, like, kind of walk on eggshells. And he's like, that's crazy. That's what I love about you. That's crazy. So go for that.
Yeah.
If one person is like putting you down or making you feel like your light is too bright, that's BS. Run for the bushes, run for the hills. Just get out of there fast if you can. Be safe about it.
That's beautiful.
That helps.
Definitely. Well, and I think that touches on something that is incredibly important for people today, especially, with how you were speaking about, we're seeing like this shift, this divergence, where people are living in this state of like constant anxiety. And it's really a time for us to, it's where connection can really make the difference between falling down what did you call it? The vortex of...
Oh, the vortex of doom. Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like there is this, when we get stuck in a negative headspace, when we start looping into that negative, obsessive kind of thought pattern that I'm sure you all know, we've all been there. Yeah. There's like this magnetic pull, and it gets easier and easier to get to the vortex of doom. And I feel like when you get sucked into that vortex of doom, it can feel so dark and so impossible to come out of it. And I would just encourage everybody to, like, who's experiencing that dark vortex of doom, to just remember it's temporary. First of all, it's temporary. And it doesn't have to define you, and it doesn't have to be something that that is inescapable. That it's just, even when I get into, like, fall into the vortex of doom, it feels like crap, first of all. So when it's happened, when you start feeling negative feelings of any sort, you're heading in that direction. So just like have like an extreme unwillingness to push yourself, when you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, to actually just have an extreme, like, whoa, I need to check in with myself and chill out and relax. Have that same extreme commitment to yourself to tune into your feelings. Your feelings will tell you everything you need to know. So anxiety, anger, frustration, any range of negative emotions, depression, stop what you're doing and give that emotional experience your 100% focus. Like, don't just operate through the day. Oh, I just got to push through. Yes, I know, easier said than done, but start creating an environment in your life where you can actually take care of yourself. Because we end up looking externally, like, oh, maybe I'll just, like, smoke this, or maybe I'll drink this, or maybe I'll, like, do whatever. If going running, go for a run or whatever, but acknowledge it first of all. Acknowledge that it's happening and see, is there anything that I can do for myself to feel better? And then soften. Like, that's never the time to start making plans, future financial plans, investment plans, to buy more things,
Wow.
to, those kinds of things. It's the time to really soften and get general. Look at the trees, pet a kitty, the dog, get really soft like that. So when you know that negative feeling, that emotional experience is happening, that's like, put on the brakes.
Yeah.
Just stop for a minute. Embody, get into your body, feel your toes, feel yourself. Because if you're thinking about the past or you're thinking about the future, you are not in the present, and you got to be in the present in order to even know where you're at.
Wow.
So calibrate from the now moment, just like, stop, get into your body, feel your body. Where am I at? It's sort of like when a car starts making a noise, Yeah. Everybody knows that when a car starts making a noise, you're like, hold it. Everybody's going to, listen. Shh. Anybody who's in the car, you're going to listen to what the car is doing, right? To make sure that everything's kosher, Same thing.
Yeah.
This physical body is our vehicle.
And
it's telling us stuff all the time, but we're ignoring them. People will say, I just wish I didn't have emotions. So much easier if we didn't have them.
Well, it doesn't really seem like that's something that we're taught. You're going to public school or with society. I never remember hearing anything about emotions as I was growing up, or how to recognize or use them.
Yeah, we're taught to ignore them, that they're inconvenient. Mm-hmm. We're taught the exact opposite. Yeah. So it's a complete 180 from what we've been taught.
Yeah.
But it's like, what are emotions? They're actually what our innate wisdom from our soul is communicating with us.
When I think, something that when you were talking about that, something that came to mind is, and this is, I don't know if I haven't heard this exact thing, but I think it's a tendency that a lot of us go to, is we start feeling these negative emotions, and maybe it was a thought, or maybe there's something in our life that's triggering it, but we automatically go to, there's something wrong with me, rather than, trying to take the time to center and recognize what's going on. And that's why I think what you just spoke about, getting into the present moment and acknowledging what's happening, is that's massively transformational. If somebody who's never taken the time to do that when they're feeling in those places, that can completely shift somebody's life.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think too, people are feeling compelled to review over and over again the past story, the injury, the horrible abuse, the trauma, all of that. It's totally natural. There's no judgment around it. But what I will say is, if that injury is defining you and limiting you in your life, there are ways you can shift that and get help in order to do that, because it can actually be a part of what makes you the amazing, resilient, powerful, unique person that you are. And so if it's feeling like a limitation, and you're feeling like, well, everything would be awesome if that, meanie didn't do what they did to me, or I didn't have that experience, or I didn't, or, whatever it is. Yeah. And I know easier said than done. I mean, I have dear beloved friends who ended their own lives because they just couldn't get beyond that. So I get it, but I'll just say that, I may come across as somebody who hasn't been through stuff, and I have. And it's just a part of what makes me who I am.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So if we can shift gears a little bit, I want to focus on the hypnotherapy portion. And a question that some people may be asking is, how does hypnotherapy work? Like, let's say that I've never done this before. What should I expect, and how's it gonna work with me?
First of all, you got to trust the person that you're going to. And hypnotherapy has come a long way. The kind of hypnotherapy that I do is much more transpersonal, meaning you like there's a real sort of spiritual component of going beyond the self in order to become more of yourself, if that makes sense. And so old school hypnotherapy is really about direct suggestion. You get a person into a relaxed state where their consciousness opens up, and then you just start hard driving stuff in there, like, you know, you're no longer a smoker. That's just something you used to do, which I do too. It's very useful because, you know, when we have those looping thoughts, it's nice to input new thoughts that you can loop that are totally like, you know, I used to be a smoker. I no longer think about it. Or the moment I have a thought about a cigarette, it just dissolves. Or, I mean, you know, whatever, cigarettes or, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to deal with. I have a client who's like an elite golfer, and, you know, so I do a lot of direct suggestions there. But when you get in, we are in trance, in and out of trance, all of us at different times in the day. So when we're waking up, when we're falling asleep, when we're driving, when we're watching TV, when we're having deep, engaging conversations, we shift in the frequency of our mind, and our energy body enhances itself to become more open. And so the conscious mind can process, what is it, something like 40 bits of data per second. The subconscious mind is working on like 20 billion bits of data, or million, I forget which one. But so the subconscious mind is dealing with so much dynamic information. And so when we open, when we're relaxed and we're not like, it's really, I've heard it described as focus too. When our focus is on one little thing like this, that's where our awareness is. That's where our consciousness is. But when we're open to the universe and we just allow ourselves to perceive like, okay, I'm just going to get real, real general. Or like zooming in on our iPhones or our smartphones, like down to a picture where we want to look at like someone's jewelry or earrings or something, or zooming way out so you can see the whole picture. Our consciousness allows us to zoom in or as out as far in as we can go and as far out. But we have to be willing to believe and entertain that is possible. So trusting the person who's doing it, having an open mind about what's possible. So I had a client who was raised as a atheist. A lot of transpersonal hypnotherapy is very spiritual, and it's kind of how it connects consciousness, and there's a real fine line between consciousness and spirituality. It's really hard to kind of separate. So if you don't believe that there's anything beyond this kind of meat unit that we're occupying, probably wouldn't encourage you to have transpersonal hypnotherapy, or anyone who has any kind of transpersonal bent or spiritual bent, but like more of an old school hypnotherapist that's just doing direct suggestion, that kind of stuff.
So if they have if a person would have a belief pattern that would struggle with the idea of connecting to anything greater than themselves, this physical body, it's going to prevent them from being able to get the benefits from this type of hypnotherapy that you use.
Right. Because I'll give you an example. So many of you and many of the viewers have been to yoga classes. So when you're doing shavasana at the end and you're kind of being guided to be the awareness in your body, that awareness is your consciousness. So, you know, how is it feeling in my toes? How is it feeling in my feet? And another thing that's happening is your imagination, your creative mind is making sense of it so that it's an experience. It's making sense of that guidance, the wording, and translating it into an experience that you're having in your mind. And so imagination is also a huge component of hypnotherapy. It's really everything. I mean, every performance sports guy or gal has known that you visualizing the win has been a big deal for a long time. And that's what hypnotherapy does. It creates a new possibility in the quantum field that you wouldn't have otherwise quantized, I guess, energized. All of a sudden you're popping up right here. I hope nothing's happened on your
No,
end.
it looks good over here.
Okay. Okay. Good.
If it gets distracting, let me know. We can get it.
You have a parallel reality right now on my screen.
Yeah, right when you started talking about quantum.
And I did a little trippy segue, and I hope that didn't throw anyone off, but that's what we're talking about. That's what consciousness is talking about. Like, what you're pointing your focus on makes your reality. And I mean, I don't need to get all into that, but it's all starting to blend right now, like science and consciousness and working. That's also why I call myself a consciousness coach in my coaching, in the coaching component of my work, because that's what we're doing. We're shifting our consciousness into something that actually works for us. It's like optimizing our OS system.
I like that. Yeah, I think that, something that you said during our last conversation is we were discussing the, thought leaders and this new science, quantum science, which I don't understand enough to talk about it intelligently. But about how, like, we're going through this shift right now where in order to make these changes inside of our life, we're being called upon to look inside, to look internally. And as you were talking about this process of hypnotherapy and working, something that came to mind that I recognized in myself when I started working with different methods of working with my consciousness and subconscious was that I didn't trust my subconscious. So that, like, going through the process of, say, hypnotherapy, when something would come up, when a memory would surface, I would blow it off. Like, that doesn't mean anything. It's in my imagination. It doesn't matter. Is that something that you've experienced?
Oh, everybody goes through that. Everybody goes through that. And that's a perfectly natural part of learning how to listen to your inner guidance. Because we've been taught so systematically that, don't listen to the heart. The heart, the heart doesn't know. It's just the heart. Or, I don't trust your gut instinct. I mean, that's such malarkey. So what happens is we have, as a defense mechanism to our consciousness or our intuition, we have the conscious mind that's like, oh, let me take control over this. So often if you're tuning in and you get a sense of something, usually you'll get your first hit, and then immediately after that, the conscious hit will go, oh, but actually this is the answer that you need to trust. So usually if you can back up to the very first one, that's the right one. But it takes a real commitment to tuning in to and experimenting. You start to get into a place of discovery of what is your guidance and what are you listening to, and then giving deference to that part of you that has been kind of swept aside as not significant or true. And so there's a reclaiming of the true self, really, that happens, and it feels amazing, because when that starts to happen, it's like, oh, this is my authentic truth. And no, it doesn't matter what anybody else says, because this is, what's true, right? Wow. Like when you start really, a number of different techniques. I mean, there's you can use muscle testing to help support connecting more deeply with your own truth, but it's really just, I love, I think it's Cohen, what's his name? I forget. I forget his first name, but anyway, he says, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Oh yeah.
So that's a great, just like starting with yes or no questions. Yes. Start to learn what your yeses and nos are, and then you can start to evolve from there. Because when you start tuning into your more intuitive self, your authentic self, you are going to be recalibrating to a new language, and it's between you and you. You're not reading it from someone else's guidance. It's all with you. So there'll be less of a pull to get your tarot cards read, or a psychic reading, or reading your horoscope. Not that those things aren't good. They can also validate what you already know, but use yourself as the 0 point.
When you're talking about this, I had these ideas kind of flood into my brain, and that's that if if we get to the point where we start recognizing this inner wisdom and accepting that, we can no longer accept living an inauthentic life. It's like the two can't coexist. So if you're going to accept that, that part of you and let that wisdom flow, you also have to make changes and take the action steps necessary to live in accordance with that. So
Amen.
That's such a huge shift for somebody to go through. I'm learning that one. I'm learning to tune into that. And it's exciting because it's kind of like it's almost like getting an instruction manual for life. I mean, it's about as close as I think we can possibly get.
That's the only way. Yeah, that's the only way you can actually get one, is to create it yourself. And what a beautiful gift that people never even realized they could do, right? Like, oh, I can just look within and get the answers. How freeing is that, And people will say, like, I don't know, I don't think I can do that. It's sort of like, yeah, you can. and I'll sometimes push people. People will call me and they'll say, well, I've heard about your spiritual sessions and I've heard about your clinical sessions, and let me tell you about what I'm going through. And I'll say, well, these are my options. I think you would be a good candidate for X, Y, and Z, but I want you to sort of feel into it and see what resonates for you. And they often don't want that. They're like, you tell me what's best. And it's like, well, just call me when you're ready. I'm going to encourage you to just sort of feel into that. And that is like, that's laying the early foundational groundwork of saying, I know that you know best. You know better than me. So play in that, and I know you'll choose right.
Interesting.
And when I wanted to add to that beautiful thing that you said about authenticity and inauthenticity, for people who are not, there's a lot of times people who are healers and coaches and, alternative wellness practitioners struggle with charging what they're worth. And I would say this, that not only is helping people align with their authenticity totally game-changing, it's also an activism. It's like, to me, it's the most powerful activism you could ever find, because people are finding their own inner truth and they're not looking externally to be led. They're the leaders of themselves. And once the collective has become sovereign and authentic within themselves, there will never be a need for war. There won't be.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
There won't be that ego conflict, because they're good.
Yeah. Or the proliferate.
It'll proliferate the field. Yeah. So consider what you do, people. You're all light workers. You're bringing it. You're here for a reason, and ask for what you are worth. And you're changing the world by your work. It's so important. It is time, like all boots on the ground. I don't mean to use military terms. Maybe I should say all light moccasins on the ground. Go big. Be your big, bad, beautiful selves.
Yeah. And
right.
to add to that, working with people as far as, coaches or working in your field, you have a certification training. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for people and what they would be able to do if they went through that?
Yes. Thanks for bringing that up. So I certify people to become the type of hypnotherapist that I am. And it's also, if any of you watching this have read Michael Newton's work, Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, Memories of the Afterlife, there's a few of them. Anyway, but basically the work is not only a track to the Newton Institute, which is another certification in life between lives hypnotherapy. And if you don't know anything about it, it's epic, amazing exploration of soul, life between lives. So your soul experience and home when you're not which is it's a game changer for sure. But the work starts out, this certification that me and my colleague offer is a basic training in clinical hypnotherapy. So you can work with people with clinical complaints from fears and worries and smoking and weight and things that someone would come for in just sort of their day-to-day stress. You can do fertility, you can do a million of things, but those kinds of complaints, you learn how to do that, and you practice that while you're being trained as a practitioner. So you get the experience of being both the client and the practitioner in the training. And then so there's 2 modules. Module 1 is that, and then you also have to take module 2, and that's regression hypnotherapy. So you learn how to regress childhood regression, in utero regression, and past life regression. And those are very dynamic expertise, because the healing opportunities that come with all of those skills combined is pretty mind-blowing. And it's the stuff that I've been talking about. And the reason that this training is so awesome is because we're approaching it from an artistry point of view, that each person coming to the training is their own unique artist. And these skills are just there to enhance what they already know and do in the world. And this is just up-leveling on a deeper level. And so we're doing a training in the spring. And I should have remembered when it's starting, but I think it's early February. Go to RaleighSchoolOfHypnosis.com, and all the information is there.
I'll leave a link down below in the description for anybody that wants to find that too.
Awesome. And my website is NoraYoung.com, and I'm assuming you're going to add that to the description box.
Definitely. Are there any other places where people can get in touch with you?
Text me. I'm like totally available. People think that that's really like, oh, you shouldn't put your phone number, like what, like they can find it anyway. So my number is 808-224-4864. Text me, and if you're weird, like I'll just block you. So, and I expect that you're going to be awesome and need me, and I can help you. So we'll just do that.
That's epic. Okay. So we'll leave that. Well, you better write down that phone number, back it up. I'm not going to put that in the description, but everything else will be there for you.
Aw, that's sweet. You're looking out for me.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Well, it's on the website. So if you need my number, people are, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, not as much Twitter, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'm always looking for amazing people to just connect with, like you and Nathaniel. And like, I'm looking for other people who want to bring it and go big and just play in this magical, amazing time that we're here for. And yeah, there's a lot of intensity, but like, let's go big anyway, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm blown away at how fast this interview has gone by. So we're nearing the end, and there's just a couple more things that I was hoping we could touch on before we wrap up.
Sure. Sorry, I'm a big talker.
No, it's been amazing. It's sometimes you have conversations and they just blow right by you, and that's when you know that you're really tapping into some really cool stuff. So one thing that I wanted to touch on, and we talked about it in our pre-interview conversation, you talked about being in the womb and the things that you can pick up and then the effects that it has on your life. Can you talk a little bit about that portion of your work?
Sure. So the work that I do is starting to really be validated by some work that's coming out. Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a cellular biologist, is talking about how our minds start to get programmed in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And so what I found in my work is that when clients are regressed into the womb, it's this really powerful time, because from a hypnotherapeutic standpoint, it's where we access soul mind, and that's basically higher self. And so when you can access soul mind, you can connect. First of all, a lot of times what happens is people will say, okay, I'm in the womb and I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling worried and scared about coming into this life. And what's interesting is if you regress them to either right after their soul entered the fetus or right before they enter the fetus, they're not feeling freaked out. They're feeling clear, that they're ready, that they sometimes might be anxious, but they're like, let's do this. I know what I'm doing, and this is what we're going to do. Let's do it. And what happens is when they've been in the fetus for a while and they're kind of marinating in mom's hormones, they're also not connected with their own consciousness. They're taking on the consciousness of mom. They're surrounded by mom's energy. So if mom's worried, fearful, fighting with dad, not 100% ready to become a mom, all that stuff, the baby doesn't have a way of discerning the self at that point between mom and the self. And so that can often imprint the personality of the baby. And so what is so cool is in this work, you can actually go and get more clarity. And if it's if it's time, the person can actually hand back mom's stuff and not carry it anymore. And then really get a stronger sense of why they're there, the purpose that they're serving, their soul wisdom kind of infused to sort of rocket boost their understanding of why they're here so they can live a more empowered life.
Yes. a whole new... Yeah, and it's a whole new flavor on the buffet. There you go. Bam.
Yeah, that's like the chocolate mousse.
So something else that you touched on is reframing wellness. And I thought that was really, really powerful because, like, it's hard for me to accept that this is reality today, but there's a lot of people who, my doctor has prescribed me these, 10 different prescriptions, and I'm well because I'm taking them. What can you say about creating wellness in your life, and what does that mean, like, today with what we're seeing in science?
Well, it's Western medicine has kind of been the dominant paradigm that is in this country anyway, and in Europe, a lot of it. But there's also been the Eastern tradition, and it's a more holistic approach that takes in the energy of the human body more readily. And I think in this work, what's cool is you can access the whole self. And so although we don't have, there's a lot, there's regulatory bodies that prevent hypnotherapists from doing any kind of like doctor-like stuff. Mm-hmm. There are some benefits that can come about. So for example, I have to specify, I don't diagnose, and I tell my clients that, but for example, I had a client who came in with psoriatic arthritis and was able to regress to a time when their parent was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and where their consciousness felt so guilty and bad that the parent was being diagnosed. And as a little person, this client literally took some of the energy of the cancer or of the terminal diagnosis and put it in their body to bear some of the burden. And so we do this when people think back to when we've all done like, oh, I feel so bad. I wish I could shoulder some of the burden. Well, guess what's happening? You're doing it. And so our choices actually create our reality. And so when you make choices, it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's just a texture in the tapestry of who you are. But to go back to experiences and reframe them in a way that releases that choice, like, oh, I got what that choice did, and these were the consequences of that choice. Well, I'd really like to go back and kind of, matrix it. Like let's change the matrix. Let's change the program. And through hypnosis, you can and whether you believe it, I mean, you have to be willing to be open to it, but you can just completely retell the story. And some people might say, well, you can't undo what has happened. It's either true or it's not true. But I, in this work, tend to be very soft in what truth is. It's very perceptual. And totally. I think when you work in this work too, what is it anyway? Like, truth is really something that we feel like we want to hang our hat on. And I think once you're perception of truth has been obliterated, and you can still hang your hat somewhere, but it doesn't have to be the same hook that another person hangs their hat on, then it becomes more fun, frankly. Like, life just becomes way better and more possible, unlimited. So you get to do what you want. Like, you get to be totally confined within a reality that's rigid if you want, and no one's going to judge you, or you can try to have some wiggle room there, and maybe that would be a little more fun.
Definitely. All right, so we're wrapping up, and I just want to ask this last question of you. You've already shared so much of your wisdom, but I feel like there's more in there. I feel like we just started talking. So I'm curious, if you could go back in time to the version of you 10 years ago, what advice would you give yourself today?
10 years ago, so that would be 2009. I would say take myself even less seriously than I did then. And to not be afraid to go even bigger. But I was only where I was, so it's, you know, I'm proud of the 2009-year-old version of me. But now I have that wisdom within me now, and I can do that now.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all of this wonderful information about hypnotherapy and consciousness. I feel like you're just a fountain of wisdom, and we could continue to talk. So I just want to say thank you. And for everyone out there, take care of yourself and allow yourself to be loved, because we are all worthy of love, and learn to listen to your inner guidance. All wisdom that you dropped in this interview. So thank you so much, Nora. Be sure to connect with her on links down below, and we'll see you guys later.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.